So let's go over the third declension nouns. And for this chapter, chapter 10, we'll be learning kind of two families of third declension nouns, or subfamilies. We'll learn an example of how third declension nouns where the consonant ends with a velar. And then we'll learn third declension nouns where the consonant ends with a dental of some type. And we'll probably use pneuma as one example and sarx as the other. For the velar example, this stem here, sarc, that's the stem without the case endings. That's from the word sarx. And I'm going to write out the complete lexical form and explain what it means later. So sarx is the nominative form. Sarcos is the genitive form. And its article is hey. And this is the lexical form. And whenever you parse words, you're going to have to list out all three elements. I want to see the nominative form, the nominative singular form. I want to see the genitive singular form, and then the article that tells me what gender it is. In this case, with the hey, you know the gender is a feminine noun. Let's recall what are the case endings for third declension nouns that are feminine. And remember, the masculine and feminine forms share the same case ending. So I'm going to write it out next to the sarx column. And so the forms for the third declension feminine nouns, these case endings, is sigma, os, e, alpha, or nu. But in this case, we're going to use alpha for the word for sarx. And then s is the nominative plural, own, si or sin for the dative plural, and lastly, os. So let's say it again. Sigma, os, e, alpha or nu, s, own, si or sin, os. Those are the case endings for the feminine noun. Now, if the stem is sarc, what happens when sarc and you add the case ending sigma? What happens when you combine them together? Remember that a kappa and sigma forms actually, in the square stops, a kasi letter. So you never see the kappa and sigma. It actually forms it combines to form an affricative among the velars. And then therefore the nominative singular form is sarx. And sarx, by the way, means flesh. So that's the word for flesh or body. Sometimes Paul uses the word sarx pejoratively to talk about the works of the flesh, or the works of our sinful nature. Flesh meaning our sinful nature. So the genitive, so what happens when I add os to it? Os. Well, then you have the stem. Remember, the stem here is sarc with the kappa, sarc. Then I add os to it, and it's sarcos. So notice that you see clearly what the stem is, not in the nominative singular, because the kappa plus the sigma changes in kasi. So the stem is actually kind of hidden in sarx. But in the genitive singular, sarcos, you clearly see the stem sarc plus the case ending os. Together it's sarcos. And so that's why when we parse words and we put down the lexical form, it's very important for the third declension nouns to write out the nominative singular, the genitive singular, and the article. Because it's the genitive singular that's going to tell you what the stem is, and it's with that stem you add all the other case endings. So if you haven't done so already, from this point on, whenever you write the lexical form when you parse a noun, it is no longer okay to write, for example, logos and then the definite article. You need to write logos, and then you can write oo or logu. You can write the whole word, logos or logu, or just simply oo, and then the definite article. You'll notice that in your Nouns textbook, your dictionary in the back, your lexicon, writes logos this way. And the reason why you do this is because when you see logos and you see that oo as a genitive, you're thinking, oh, I know what type of noun this is. Logos is a second declension noun because it uses the second declension genitive singular oo, not the third declension os that we just saw with sarx or sarcos. So the way you remember what family of noun, whether it's first, second, or third declension, is in fact to write out the nominative form, the genitive form, and the article for all the nouns that you list out in its lexical form. So if you do not include the nominative singular, the genitive form, and the article when you parse, it's considered to be wrong. So let's finish the chart. So we have sarx in the nominative singular. In the genitive singular, we have sarcos. What happens when we add e, the iota, to the stem sarc? It becomes sarki, and that's your dative singular. And what about the accusative singular? We'll add to it the alpha, sarka, and that's the accusative singular. Now, we've learned that the accusative singular can use an alpha or a nu, depending on what type of noun is being used. And so for the velars, they tend to use the alpha, and that's why we're using that for the accusative singular. As you learn more types of third declension nouns, today again we're only learning the velars and we're learning the dentals. But as you learn more types of third declension nouns, you'll know when, because of the family of noun that you're using, or the subfamily, whether to use the alpha or the nu. It's just simply something that you're going to memorize as part of the paradigm that you're learning. So the velars like using the alpha. What about the nominative plural? How do I say fleshes? So sarx is, say, flesh. Sarcos is of flesh. Sarki is to flesh. Sarcos as a direct object is flesh. How do I say fleshes? Fleshes. So I would say sarc, and the case ending is s, so sarkes. How do I say of fleshes? It would be sarcone. And now here, we have to remember our square stops again, because we have a sigma here. What happens when we add sarc plus sin, or c? Notice that you have the kappa and the sigma combining, and that will become a kasi, or fricative in our square stops. So the dative plural is sarxin, sarxi or sarxin. That's two fleshes. And then what is the accusative plural? It's sarcos. So let's say this paradigm from the top. So we're going to say sarx from the top. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Say it with me, please. Sarx, sarcos, sarki, sarka, sarkes, sarcone, sarxin, sarcos. Let's say it again. 1, 2, 3. Sarx, sarcos, sarki, sarka, sarkes, sarcone, sarxin, and sarcos. And what we went over was one type or one subtype of the third declension nouns, the velars, and we use sarx, the word for flesh, as an example. Now let's go over a dental example. And so in order to do that, I'm going to clear the board. I'm going to clear the chart. So let's clear the chart. And then I'm going to look at the word pneuma. And by the way, anima is going to look like pneuma, and soma is going to look like pneuma. It's going to look exactly the same. So soma is the word for body, and anima is the word for name. This is new vocabulary this week. And so soma, and then this is anima, and then here we have pneuma. Pneuma happens to be a neuter noun. It's a neuter noun. So what are the case endings for the neuter noun in third declension? Third declension. It's a different set of endings. We did a feminine noun, now we're going to do neuter noun. It's nothing, os, e, nothing, alpha, own, C or sin, alpha. So notice that the stem here is pneumat, mot, with a tau. What happens when you add nothing to the stem? Well, the tau drops, and so the nominative singular form is pneuma. This tau here drops when you add nothing to the stem. So pneuma is the word for spirit. And then, but what happens when you add os to it? Well, it's pneumat. That's the stem. Remember, that's the stem. And then you add os to it, pneumatos. That's a genitive singular. So you have spirit, of a spirit. What about to a spirit? Pneumat, add e to pneumati. And then, as expected, the nominative singular and then the accusative singular endings are the same. So when you add nothing to the stem, the tau drops, and then it's pneuma. Now, watch how the plurals form. When the plurals formed here, you're adding alpha to the stem. So let's write at the stem, pneumat, and I'm adding alpha. So pneumata. So pneuma is the singular form for nominative and accusative, and pneumata is the plural form for the nominative plural and also for the accusative plural, which we'll soon discover. What's the genitive? So pneumata would be spirits. Pneumaton, add tone to it, own to pneumat, and you get of spirits. And what happens when you add pneumat plus sin to it? Remember what happens when a tau and a sigma come together? The dentals don't really have a separate letter for their fricative, so what happens? The tau drops, and they use the sigma for their fricative. So the data plural is pneumasin, or C. So that's two spirits. And then how do I say spirits again? Just like the nominative plural, the accusative plural is pneumata. So let's say, here we have an example of a neuter noun in third declension. And so let's say the paradigm for pneuma. So let's pronounce the paradigm for pneuma, which means spirit. So say it with me. Pneuma, pneumatos, pneumati, pneuma, pneumata, pneumaton, pneumasin, pneumata. Let's say that again. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Pneuma, pneumatos, pneumati, pneuma, pneumata, pneumaton, pneumasi, and pneumata. And that is an example of the neuter noun in the third declension. So I'll let you go ahead and pause the instructional video. Why don't you go and fill out the columns for anima and the columns for soma. So fill out the columns for soma, which means body, and anima, which is name, and then join me again here on this slide. We just learned two types or subclasses of third declension nouns. We learned the velars with the word sarx, and we learned a dental neuter noun, pneuma, spirit, or anima, name, or soma, body, as another third declension type noun. In your vocabulary, you were given the name Simon in English or Simone in Greek as one of your vocabulary words. This happens to be a third declension noun. Since the New Testament doesn't refer to Simon in the plural, on this chart we just have the singular forms. And Simon, as you can guess, is a masculine name, and so therefore it uses the masculine endings. And so the endings for the masculine singular form is sigma, os, e, alpha. And with the masculine noun, what happens is the stem is Simone, and when you add a sigma to it, in the nominative singular, the sigma drops. The sigma doesn't, it gets bullied out by the new. So, but for the rest of the paradigm simply adds on to the existing stem, or the case endings add on to the existing stem. So if you add to Simone, os, you get Simonos as a genitive form. Add e, then you have Simone. And so this is Simon, this is of Simon, or Simon's apostrophe S. This is to Simon, and if you want to use Simon as a direct object, then you have Simona. And so this is an example of a nasal stem at work, where the consonant that ends the stem is either a N sounding or M sounding letter. So it would be a nu in Greek or a mu in Greek, because the sound originates from your nose, so that's why it's called a nasal stem. And this is another type of third declension noun. And we're introducing it here because you learned Simon as part of your vocabulary.